Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Now, many MPs seem to agree that the referendum was a vote in favour of stronger controls on immigration. But beyond that, there doesn't seem to be much agreement on what our immigration system should look like once we leave the EU. Well, today, the Home Affairs Select Committee is launching a nationwide inquiry to try to address that. Its chair, Yvette Cooper, has been speaking this morning. Let's take a look at what she had to say.
We know that immigration is really important for Britain, but that it also has to be controlled and managed so that the system is fair and so that the public can have confidence in it and support the system. Right now, that doesn't happen, and public concern has steadily grown, and it has consistently been one of the highest concerns over the last 10 years. And often the debate about immigration has been angry and polarised, and has been an excuse for some people to whip up fear or anger and dividing communities, making it harder to have a thoughtful discussion about the reforms that are needed. And some people have felt that they simply can't speak out at all.
And Yvette Cooper joins us now. What do you think the referendum told us about people's views on immigration?
I think for a lot of people it was about immigration and wanting more control. For others it wasn't, and we shouldn't simplify this too much. For some people it was around sovereignty, for some people it was around issues of concern about the economy and just simply wanting change. But there's no doubt that for a lot of people this was about immigration. But I think more widely, then if you look, concern across the country, over half the people in polls will say that immigration benefits the economy, but about 3/4 will also say that they want the level to be lower. So you get a mix of views, both from people who are in favour of staying in and in favour of coming out of the EU.
So what's your nationwide inquiry going to prove? You seem to have all the information.
So what the inquiry is going to look at is three things. First of all, on Brexit. Well, what does it actually mean? What kinds of controls do people want? What sorts of reforms could you have? Sometimes people have talked about work permits. They've talked about points-based systems. They've talked about controls just on low-skilled migration. They've talked about free movement. There's a whole series of different things. We know that people want change, but what kind of change? And people haven't got a voice in that at the moment because there isn't any government consultation happening. So we want to have an opportunity for people across the country to get involved in that debate.
Is your approach, though, when you look at Brexit and its impact on immigration, going to be one that is looking at lowering numbers of immigrants coming here?
To be honest, it's going to be open to whatever anybody wants to raise with us.
Right.
And so it'll be all of the issues that people want to raise with us.
And if they across the UK say, actually, that wasn't what we voted for in the referendum, even if we voted leave, and a lot of people say we're happy with the levels of immigration, then that's what you would advise government to do?
Well, what we want is to hear from everybody and to have that discussion.
Right.
To be honest, I wouldn't expect that to be the conclusion.
Right, you
but
don't.
We should have everybody have the chance to have that debate.
And would you admit, then, that you didn't really know what was going on in your own constituency, and nor did many other Labour MPs. Your seat is in Normanton, and if you look at the votes, 66.3% voted leave, 33.6% remain. Would you say you were out of touch with their constituents?
No, because I knew that people were very concerned about immigration.
But you did nothing
and
about
also that they were, concerned about the EU as well. And that's one of the reasons why I thought, even before the referendum, that we should actually have more restrictions on free movement. And I was arguing that before the referendum, partly because I think the real concern in an area like mine is about the level of low-skilled migration, particularly being exploited by employers that's used to undercut wages and jobs.
Right.
But this isn't just about one constituency. The point about having a cross-party inquiry
but it is a place to start,
is to hear from everybody all over the country.
You're also a Labour MP,
want.
and it is a start, isn't it? And both you and Ed Miliband, the former leader, and other Labour politicians said you recognised the problem of too many low-skilled migrants from Eastern Europe, as you saw it, but weren't prepared to end freedom of movement, were you?
No, I called for, actually, reforms to free movement, because I thought we should be arguing for that within the EU.
Right.
So that's something I've always thought.
Although
and I think
David Cameron asked for that, of course, and didn't get it.
And we had that debate as part of the referendum debate, but that's done now. Where we're
Right.
at now is we've had the referendum debate. We know that the Brexit negotiations are going to start. The key question is, what do people want out of it? And again, my view is that we shouldn't be arguing to carry on with free movement. There have been a whole series of issues with it, and what we'll be looking at is what kinds of controls people want. But I don't want to prejudge what's got to be a cross-party inquiry and a different kind of inquiry. Select committees don't normally do this kind of inquiry.
Right, but you must take responsibility.
We will be going round the country, listening to what people's views are, and to see as well as if we can build a consensus, because often it's been too divided as well.
And it's divided within the Labour Party, because you said you do recognise some of the concerns and you would like to have some sort of restrictions on freedom of movement. But Jeremy Corbyn, the Labour leader, Diane Abbott and Emily Thornberry believe immigration, as I suppose you do too, has been hugely beneficial to the UK economically. They've got the figures to back it up, and they don't want to do anything about the numbers. So how does Labour square that? You think the numbers should come down, and they don't.
And I disagree with Jeremy and Diane on that, and that's something that I've said for some time.
So how does the Labour Party have an approach, an agreed position on this issue, which you're going to do a nationwide inquiry on?
Well, the Labour Party's got to obviously have its processes to make the decision, and that's for the front bench to lead. But what we're trying to do is a backbench select committee inquiry where we're not just driven by what the front bench positions are, whether that is what the government says or whether that is what the Labour front bench say. And what we do is listen to evidence from around the country and try to pull together what a consensus should be. Because I do agree that immigration has benefited, people coming from abroad have benefited this country for very many centuries. It's just got to be controlled and managed so the system is fair.
People may say we've talked about immigration for a very long time, and we have had a referendum which wasn't necessarily on immigration, but it was a big part of it for many people, in favour and against. What will this actually do, this national inquiry?
Well, there are two processes that British politics needs to go through. One is the one whereby the government gets a position on freedom of movement. It hasn't got one. Labour...
Well, the government has said it does want to restrict freedom of movement.
But it doesn't give us any detail about that. And Labour, likewise, it needs to have a conference, a national policy forum. It needs to come up with what it wants to replace freedom of movement. Because freedom of movement is gone. It's part of the Lisbon Treaty. We'll be out of it in 2 years' time. Therefore, all the parties need a replacement. But the other process is the process of democratic, liberal-minded politicians trying to hear and also heal what is coming from working class communities. Because we all have this kind of euphemism, concerns about migration. I come from a town where there hasn't been a lot of migration. It's Andy Burnham's constituency, Lee. It's now the target of UKIP. UKIP are going to stand apparently in the by-election. I know the way that migration has played with, like, my dad's generation, my uncle's generation, and it seemed to them that what was being saying is that we destroyed your union rights, we've destroyed a lot of the services you rely on, and he is the ideal worker, somebody with no political rights, no right to vote in a general election, no roots in this country, and we need to be able to go to them and say, look, we have an answer. We have a clear political answer that allows you to feel comfortable with what is inevitable. High levels of migration from all over the world are going to happen with or without European Union, because that's the way the modern economy works.
So do you think Jeremy Corbyn has been wrong to say he's not worried, he's relaxed about numbers for those communities that you've just talked about?
Look, what he specifically said was that somebody put to him, is there going to be a numbers thing? I think you don't start out from a number, because what you would then have to do is to go to a general hospital across the road here in London and say which of the Greek and Italian and Spanish nurses you don't want to be there.
All right.
You start out from the principle of re-engaging with people's genuine concerns.
Thank you very much, Yvette Cooper.